Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight we have Kip Winger, and this is going to be coming from 2015, and he's going to be playing through Blind Revolution Mad from his one-man band show, which I've actually been to see a few years ago. So I've got some insider insight, I guess, about this, but let's get Kip up on screen and see how he gets on.
Charity heart, faithfully praise. Heal the scars unto his eyes, and salvage the goodness of dreams never lived. Dreams never lived. Again and again, again and again, haunted by the trust of a child, with no place to go now. Little boy brave wanders the streets, faithfully prays, but his broken arrow, once filled with pride, aimed and missed at. The dreams never live, dreams never die. Again and again, haunted by the trust of a child. Never give in, never give up. Little boy brave, never live, never die. Appears to be blind revolution, man. Mercy ends where the mercy began. Seems justified, I'm turning this around. Law-breaking lawmaker, have it your way. Crank my guitar, man. Campaign smoke screen, glorify the mainstream cities on remote control. Meanwhile, vigilante gangs dig their fangs into the streets. They've overthrown plastic faces who run for king. There's an association love.
Right, I'm just going to jump in here because I want to say so much about Kip Winger. Obviously, I'm a fan of Winger, the band, and just the all-round sound, and just Kip as a guy as well. And I have been fortunate enough to meet Kip after a gig, just kind of hanging around, and he came out and spoke to everybody. And the thing about Kip, he's such a down-to-earth, genuine guy, but people might see him just as one of these 80s guys because he sang for Winger, and they were around, their first album, 1988, and then towards the early part of the 90s, the whole grunge thing came in, and unfortunately, I think Winger were on the tail end of that whole 80s movement, so we're a little bit late to the party, but certainly, if they'd turned up earlier, they would have absolutely wiped the floor, I'm sure, and just a few songs that maybe got into the mainstream a little bit more, but certainly with Kip's ability, because Kip used to play bass, he does play bass, but here he's playing guitar, but with Winger, he'd be out front with the bass, supplying those lead vocals. He was also with Alice Cooper to begin with, and backing vocalist and player for Alice Cooper, and imagine having this kind of guy behind you on backing vocals. But moving into Kip's playing, the amazing thing about this is he's taking original songs that are a full, heavy-sounding rock band, and it's really progressive in nature as well, And he's converting that all to a 12-string guitar. And because I've been to his shows before, I can tell you that it absolutely is engaging for the whole hour or hour and a half, just Kip with the guitar, because he's got that ability vocally to take you to different places dynamically. I've mentioned before about how some players who actually play their instrument and sing, it's rare to have a singer who has such a great voice where they can take their vocals up an octave, because that is the ultimate dynamic changer. And Kip's voice, it sounds like a chest register belt when he gets right up into, we're talking about the male tenor range, hitting high C's for fun. It's really something that has amazed me about Kip Winger. It's just his voice and having actually heard it live. And the other thing that will knock you back with Kip is his ability on the 12-string and acoustic guitar, and the way that he lays down all of these fingerstyle patterns with this progressive material where the lyrics by no means follow what you're doing on the guitar or what Kip's doing on the guitar. So it's so impressive to watch from a player's point of view, and from a singer's point of view. Just what a voice, what a unique sound he has. You instantly know it's Kip once he starts singing. And something that I try and stress on my channel all the time is that even if you're not into a particular genre of music, try and listen to everything, because there might be something that you hear in a different genre that you might want to add. It might even just be a guitar technique that you might then want to add to whichever genre you might be playing. And Kip is the classic example of people misjudging him by first seeing him with Winger and, you know, with the tight leather trousers on and topless and all that kind of stuff that went in the 80s. Kip, when he was 16, he studied classical music, and you can certainly tell just by the way that if you've heard Blind Revolution Mad, the actual studio version, and what he's taking and what he's converting onto a 12-string is absolutely a masterclass of composing. And because he's got that classical background, and by the way, one of his tracks from his classical album got to #1 in the Billboard classical charts, so he knows what he's doing. He can compose. He's got that music theory. He's got so much knowledge and appreciation of music and melody. And an interesting story about Kip: when he was 16 and studying classical music, he sent one of his demos into Alan Parsons, and he actually got a reply from Alan himself, who wrote him a letter in response. And then 30 years later, Kip was chosen to be the singer for the Alan Parsons Live project, and he brought along that original letter, that original response, and showed it to Alan 30 years later. So a cool little story, but just indicative actually of so many players and top musicians who just absolutely relentlessly work away at it year after year after year. There are so many stories of top artists who just didn't give up, and sometimes that's the only difference between someone who makes it and is successful than somebody who doesn't make it, is because they give up probably just when they're about to get a break. It's those guys that really do see it through to the end that eventually make that break happen. But let's get back into the video.
One more chance of a lifetime. Rage runs rampant, always been abandoned, killing for some pocket change. Claims being force-fed rules, governed by fools, slamming you against the grain. And the nation's glued to CNN to watch their own creation be born.
we have it. Another thing that I want to bring up about Kip's voice is the way that he's got the ability to have all that grit on there if he wants it, but then as we saw in the little passage where we have a really clean head voice sound, and that is something that is so difficult. In order to have that control, you'll find that a lot of singers, when they're belting, and the range that they get into in their upper register, especially chest voice, they have to belt to get there. Whereas having the ability to have that really clean sound up at the top of your range, something that Kip's absolutely got total control. And just talking about the 12 string and the way that Kip has composed these pieces for just this one-man band setup, of course, having the ability to arrange a whole orchestra certainly does come in useful, but you can tell that he's absolutely focusing on these chord voicings which leave the open strings as much as he can wherever possible. Even with runs where he is working his way up and down the fretboard, he's still getting those open string configurations so that you get that really nice full sound. And that's exactly what you want if it's just one person. And that's the thing that will fly under the radar if you go and watch him live. But even in these videos, this is just a guy with a guitar and his voice, and all you need to see is this video, because look at the crowd. Even though you've got guys here that undoubtedly would have been into the heavy, more progressive hard rock that Kip was known for in the late 80s and early 90s, but that kind of crowd are going there to watch Kip and appreciate the music and the artistry, and you can see that this is not a wild crowd. Everyone is absolutely transfixed. The amazing thing we've got here is Kip is playing fingerstyle, playing runs and singing. So he's got all those three elements going on at the same time and just making it look ridiculously easy. Another thing that I want to mention, and I don't want to bring up age, but I'm going to, because Kip is roughly in his mid-50s in this video. He's in his late 50s now. But when you think about that he's still performing these songs that are so vocally difficult and demanding, think of all those guys in the 80s and even the 90s who now really struggle to sing at that same range and do have to make real concessions with some of the hits that they used to play, maybe sometimes bringing it down a whole tone, maybe a couple of tones in some cases. But Kip absolutely is still melting faces with his vocals because he's so accurate, but he's got such great technique. And not that you'd think to look at him that he's in his mid-50s in this video, because he's one of those guys that just doesn't seem to age, and half of that is just because he still gives the same performances. It's not as if you go to one of his gigs and you get a watered down performance of what you used to see. It's still the same guy, it's still the same voice. Another thing I want to mention is that there used to be a cartoon called Beavis and Butthead, and I think one of the characters from that used to wear a Winger shirt, and they might have come in for some flack from that cartoon. I wasn't old enough to watch it, so I haven't really seen it. I think he's one of those guys that if you don't really listen to him a lot, or if you didn't really get into the Winger stuff, you've only really scratched the surface of what Kip's all about, because such a talented musician just overall and artist. And he's a great example as well that if you've got a great voice, that's not enough. You have to work at something else. And Kip studying classical music, but also working at his instruments in terms of bass and playing acoustic guitar, electric guitar, playing a little bit of lead guitar, I've heard as well on electric. So there are so many things that Kip's worked at in order to get where he is. And by no means is he one of those household names that everybody will know all over the world, but he's just doing great little gigs like this, just absolutely showing the level of musicianship and ability that he's got. But like I said, thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!